Welcome back to the Crash Course Podcast. My name is CraigCrash Collins, joined as always by Brandon Scott, otherwise known as B. Scott. We've got a lot to get into. The NFL Draft is in the books, so we're going to talk all about it. We're going to talk about the biggest surprises from the draft. We're going to talk about we're going to give our reaction to the draft in general. We're going to say, give our way too early predictions for who's going to win Rookie of the Year. We're also going to talk some Colts as well. Recap the Colts draft and give our thoughts there, as well as what the Colts should do the rest of the offseason. So it's going to be a lot of fun, whether you're tuning in on YouTube or you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or watching live on Twitch. Welcome in, B. Scott. It was a fun, honestly, this is the first time, normally I keep track of the draft, and yes, I did have it on as background noise a lot of the time, but it was fun to keep up with, especially because there was, for a draft, you wouldn't think of a draft as having, a lot of action, but it really did, especially on that first night with, all the trades, all the things that were going on.
Yeah, it was a really good, it was fast. I think it was really fast. Matter of fact, it was so fast and these teams were so ready to go that the NFL apparently got angry at the Detroit Lions for having the number 2 pick in too soon. The number 1 pick was announced and there was Detroit standing there with their card ready to go. And they were like, no, you got to use some time. So yeah, it was a good draft. Lots of surprises, a lot of trades. There was a few picks that you didn't see coming, but those are typically from teams that pick that way. And then, man, the run on wide receivers was unreal, historically unreal. So that was pretty cool. And then my favorite part is always just watching the reaction of the guys and seeing lives being changed right there. I think that's one of the coolest parts of the entire draft. I do get a little bored with it come day 3 when they're not showing the reactions and they're not even going to the stage and announcing the pick. It's just, it pops up on the bottom and the name flashes and then here are the last 5 picks and they kind of briefly touch on them.
Yeah.
That day is a little long and rough, but
I was gonna say they don't even show the highlight package. That's one of
sometimes
the
they
parts
do.
Yeah, sometimes
they do.
But that's one of the parts that I really love about it is when they show all the highlights of that player, especially in those middle rounds, because if you're any fan, but I obviously I don't know all the names of the drafted as far as yes, I know their names because they're in the outline, but I haven't seen play some of those ones in the middle round, so it's nice to see those highlight packages and be oh, this is the dude that's now on the Colts, or this is the dude that's now on the Titans, who we have to worry about for the next however many years. So yeah, when you get to that very last day, there it does kind of disappoint me when you do see some, but not every single one, which is understandable. It just still is kind of a bummer.
Yeah, but hey, it was a strong draft overall for a lot of teams. I was very happy with the Colts picks. I was happy with other picks from other teams, some guys from Purdue. There was some pleasant surprises, like in the 6th round, I believe it was 6th or 7th round, Purdue running back Xander Horvath getting drafted.
I was surprised to see that, especially from a team that's always seemed to struggle running the football. Not that Xander didn't do a great job. He was a great running back while he was there.
Right.
But it just, from an aspect of the Purdue offense that you don't see very often, it was interesting to see him go to the Chargers.
But apparently when I was I was reading the coverage of Purdue's workouts and everything, people were saying that would be one player they would not be surprised to see end up getting drafted because of his physique, I guess, his work ethic. He put up really strong workout numbers at Purdue's Pro Day. So people really weren't all that surprised to see that. So it was that. And then, 3 Purdue guys, I was pleasantly surprised about that. And I think every one of the Purdue guys at least landed in probably a better situation than if they would have been drafted any earlier.
Right.
In my opinion, like George Karlaftis, yeah, it would have been great for him to be a top 10 pick. But he's going now directly to the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, he's in a win now. He's in a situation where he gets to win. That's cool.
Gets a pretty good chance of continuing that tradition of Purdue players in the Super Bowl.
Right. And look, he's going into a situation where the team is needing some younger pass rushers. So they went out and they got that. So that's good. It was a great situation. And then David Bell. I mean, look, the Cleveland Browns don't really have any wide receivers anymore.
Besides
and he's
Amari Cooper.
Oh, yeah, besides Amari Cooper.
But I mean, that's like a great situation to go learn under a guy who's as prolific as Amari Cooper is.
Right, and they're also talking about still bringing back Jarvis Landry, which is another great situation for him, but the quarterback situation is filled there. A lot of times when you get these guys that get picked in the top 10, the teams that they're going to are in situations that just they don't have all the right pieces. It's going to take them a while. And the things that some guys need to succeed, like a wide receiver to have good numbers, needs a strong quarterback. And well, guess what? Cleveland's got 2 quarterbacks that are pretty good.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and get into it here. The first round, lots of trades, as we mentioned, lots of wide receivers, as we mentioned. Georgia's defense, they break the NFL record with 5 first-rounders. The Jaguars take defensive end Trayvon Walker at number 1. Defensive tackle Jordan Davis goes to the Eagles at number 13. The Packers grab linebacker Quay Walker at 22. Then the Pack also double down and get Devontae Watt at 28 as the streak continues of Green Bay not taking a wide receiver in the first round. We talked about that last week.
Yeah,
and I thought
that being able to take who they took in the second round, close enough.
Oh yeah, for sure. And yeah, I mean, it was a situation where, even with the run on wide receivers, yeah, like you said, when the second day opened up and I looked at who was on the board for who potentially the Colts could get a wide receiver, I was like, man, if some of these guys fall down here, it'll be pretty good. And it ended up working out.
I'll be honest. When we traded away the 42nd pick, I was happy to see all the picks we got in return. I was like, oh man, I don't know if George Pickens is going to be there. And then boom, at 43, the Texans take George Pickens.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, come on. We could have had him, and now he's a division rival.
Well, even 51 or whatever was like Mechie out of Alabama, who I thought was like, man, if he drops to the Colts, that'd be really cool because I know he would have been probably a first rounder had he not gotten hurt. So
right,
so I was definitely hoping he would still be there. But I mean, hey, literally we got who we talked about a couple of weeks ago when we did the Colts draft preview and Alec Pierce, which is pretty cool.
Exactly.
And then Lewis Seen, a safety drafted by Minnesota. He was drafted at number 32. That rounds out the Georgia players. 6 wide receivers taken in the first round as well. Drake London to the Falcons out of USC. Ohio State's Garrett Wilson goes to the Jets. His teammate Chris Olave to the Saints. Jamison Williams out of Alabama goes to the Lions. Johan Dotson out of Penn State goes to the Commanders. And then Treylon Burks from Arkansas goes to the Titans. Only one quarterback.
Here's a fun fact. So that run that took 3 consecutive wide receivers, Ohio State's Garrett Wilson, Ohio State's Chris Olave, and then Alabama's Jamison Williams. Or Jameis Williams. Yeah. Williams. Yeah. All 3 of those guys were at one point teammates at Ohio State.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jamison Williams transferred to Alabama. Actually, Jamison Williams had a really good showing against Clemson in, I believe it was the 2020 playoffs. So there you go. Fun fact.
That's pretty crazy. Kenny Pickett is the only quarterback taken in the first round going to the Steelers. First time since 2013 that only one quarterback was taken in the first round, and of all the trades, none involved a team that did not already have a first-round pick, so surprises all around based on what we were looking at last week. The Packers don't take a wide receiver in the first round, although, like you said, damn near got a first round talent in the receiver they were able to get. Then you have only one quarterback. We were like, oh, definitely there's going to be more than that because there's going to be a run on him because of the uncertainty of who's actually going to be the best in this draft. And then we thought, okay, 8 teams don't pick on day one. Surely one of them's going to sneak in there. None of them do. So kind of wild that's how it worked out. Other draft notes. Our impact players, Malik Willis gets drafted by the Titans in the 3rd round. That's pretty nuts. Chris Olave, we mentioned him going to the Saints. Wide receiver George Pickens goes in round 2 to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Jermaine Johnson is drafted by the New York Jets at number 26, so I thought that was surprising that he fell that far, which, I mean, isn't super far, but at the same time, it's still first round, but, had him projected in the top 10. Then, of course, George Karlaftis, as you mentioned, goes to the Chiefs at 30. Packers draft Christian Watson in the 2nd round out of North Dakota State, so they get their wide receiver. Quarterbacks, Desmond Ridder, 2nd off the board to the Atlanta Falcons. That was pretty wild. Ole Miss quarterback Matt Corral goes to the Panthers. Georgia, 15 players selected, which is a record in the modern draft era. And then Iowa State quarterback Brock Purdy selected as Mr. Irrelevant to the 49ers, which I didn't know.
That's surprising.
Did you
I
know?
thought he would have. I would have thought he would have gone higher.
Yeah. Did you know that Mr. Irrelevant gets like a whole shebang? Like,
oh yeah,
yeah,
it's a huge deal.
I didn't know that. I saw a TikTok that like described like they go to Disneyland and they do this and they do that. I was like, man, that's pretty legit. I like that.
And who do you go to? The Jets?
The 49ers.
49ers. Okay. Yeah, but yeah, to be the last pick. Yeah, you don't get it. You don't get the guaranteed contract or anything like that, but you get a lot of perks. It's a pretty big honor.
Okay, so I mean, it kind of blows if you're not first, you're last out of the water, because if you're last, you feel like you're first in a way.
Yeah, it's the only pick on day 3 that they actually go to the stage for.
Right. So looking at our biggest surprises, and so we're going to do it this way. We're going to do biggest surprise in terms of where they were drafted, and we're going to also do biggest surprise in terms of how far they fell. So we're going to start with where they were drafted. I'm going to go with a guy that I mentioned that I thought the Colts could maybe nab in the 3rd round or 4th round, and that is the Giants selecting wide receiver Wan'Dale Robinson, 2nd round, pick 43. NFL.com mock draft ironically had him going to the Giants, but not until pick 112. That's early 4th round. CBS had him going to the 4th round as well. I had the Colts potentially taking him in the 3rd round. He's taken before John Mechie, George Pickens, Sky Moore, and Alec Pierce, all projected to have bigger upside. He's 5'8" compared to Brandon Cooks, a slower Tyreek Hill. Essentially, he's gonna be he's gonna be in a wide receiver room with the likes of Kenny Golladay, Sterling Shepard, Brian Dable, the mastermind of the Bills offense is his head coach. So maybe this is a perfect fit. But definitely, when I saw that name flash up on the board, because I was thinking, okay, maybe the Colts can get him. With one of the picks they ended up getting in the trade or something like that later on in the 3rd round, or maybe they can get him in the 5th, maybe not the 5th, but maybe they can get him at some point down the line, and to see him go before the Colts even made their first pick, I was pretty shocked by that.
Yeah, considering, I mean, he was utilized as so much as a running back throughout his time at Nebraska before heading to Kentucky, and he had a good season at Kentucky, but I wouldn't say it was great. Honestly, I wasn't too, I was shocked that he went that high. But for me, other than like the number 1 pick, I guess I was a little shocked Trayvon Walker, because he just kind of came out of nowhere. Mm-hmm. Let's be honest. For the longest time, is it Aiden Hutchinson or is it one of the 2 offensive linemen? And then, because clearly Aiden Hutchinson and Kayvon Thibodeau were the cream of the class when it came to defensive ends, and then Trayvon Walker just shot up the boards and it was like, boom, now he's number 1 overall. So you know what, honestly, I'm going to stick with that one, just because he came out of nowhere in the last 2 weeks, it felt like. And typically, yeah, you see guys rise on draft boards and, oh yeah, they got picked in the top 15 instead of, a fringe first rounder. No, this guy shot up draft boards and all of a sudden was the number 1 overall pick. It's like, huh? So that was my biggest surprise. I mean, obviously, look, last week I actually didn't I say Jacksonville was going to take Icky Nwekam from NC State? I thought, and then to see him, he fell. Where did he end up? He ended up, well, he only fell to 6, but there was so many teams that I thought that he would have gone to prior to dropping to 6. I mean, he was the first offensive player taken. So,
and what's crazy too is that Trayvon Walker was listed as an interior lineman, or at least he's listed as a D tackle. And I look at the Jaguars depth chart right now. This is courtesy of ESPN, and they have him listed as the right defensive end. So it's kind of odd. So maybe
yeah, that's what NFL.com has him listed as a D end.
Okay. So kind of wild that it seemed like, okay, if you're going to take a D end, you take, like you said, Thibodeau or Hutchinson. And so to take a guy that, I mean, like I said, at one point at least he was listed as a D tackle. So, but I mean, it also sounds like from that perspective too, that he can be literally anywhere on the line and he'll make a difference. So, I mean, maybe that's the kind of upside he has, but just kind of wild that, yeah, you're right.
Especially with 2 cornerstone pieces of an offensive line potential were right there, and when you have your franchise quarterback already, I would if I'm a GM, I'm looking at bolstering my O line at that point.
Let's see who the Jaguars offensive. Okay, so he is listed as defensive line. I don't know what I was looking at. Maybe I'm thinking of Jordan Davis at D tackle. I think I am.
Yeah. No, I think you are right. He did play some interior. I feel like
maybe. Jacksonville did not take offensive line at all, or they took a center. They took Luke Fortner out of Kentucky, but not take a left tackle, to not take
they really needed a right tackle because they are keeping Cam Robinson.
I gotcha
on board. But what's funny is that the 2 that got picked, honestly, so Icky and Evan, they both really kind of grade out to be better right tackles. That was according to Mel Kiper. And, who's Mel Kiper?
To my knowledge, never put on a jock strap, never played a down of football, and he's going to tell us who we have to take.
My neighbor's a mailman and knows more than Mel Kiper.
That's such a good clip. I love that. I love it so much. Only because, you think of that clip, it's from, the 90s? When they had Harbaugh.
No. It's the 80s.
Harbaugh was the quarterback for the Colts, so it had to be 90s because that was 95 that they lost to the Steelers in the. Are
you sure? Because it was a draft. It was a draft when they decided to take.
Or maybe no, because 2 years later they got Peyton Manning, so I think that was.
And yeah, Jim Irsay was the head guy then, not his dad.
I'll look it up.
That was Robert Irsay. I'm pretty sure that was in the 80s when they took Jeff George.
No, because they took Marshall Faulk with that pick, I thought.
Maybe. I don't know. I felt like it was the 80s. Or was it I don't know, was it when they drafted John Elway and John Elway said, I'm going to go play baseball? And you're like, wait, no, we'll trade you.
I don't know if you're going to be able to hear this, but of course it's going to be 8 minutes. I'm going to on this day 28 years ago is when this happened. So it's from Twitter.
On this day 28 years ago.
Yeah. Because, it was 28 years ago. So 1994, they were supposed to take Trent Dilfer. You're not going to be able to hear this, but they can hear this on the stream.
Outside linebacker, somebody has to learn coverage in Trev Alberts. But to pass up a Trent Dilfer when all you have is Jim Harbaugh, give me a break.
Pass up Trent Dilfer when all you have
second every year in the draft, not battling for the Super Bowl like other clubs in the National Football League.
Who in the hell is Mel Kiper in a way? I mean, here's a guy that criticizes everybody, whoever they take. He's got the answers to who you should take and who you shouldn't take. In my knowledge of him, he's never ever put on a jockstrap. He's never been a coach. He's never been a scout. He's never been an administrator. And all of a sudden, he's an expert. He's in our papers 2 days ago telling us who we have to take. We don't have to take anybody that Mel Kiper says we have to take. Mel Kiper has no more credentials to do what he's doing than my neighbor, and my neighbor's a postman, and he doesn't even have season tickets to the NFL.
What do you want to cover first, our players or that?
Yeah, So they didn't take Trent Dilfer. They passed on him twice in the top 10 apparently. And they had Jim Harbaugh, and that's why. So yeah, it was they should have drafted Trent Dilfer with one of those first 2 picks, is what Mel Kiper was saying. And then Bill Tobin was the director of football operations. That's the guy who went off on Kiper.
Oh,
but what
okay.
I think is wild is the fact that like this was a day and age where you don't think they're gonna have like multi-camera angles, and they like flip back to Mel Kiper as this guy's tearing him a new one, and that's my favorite part of that clip because he's like just sitting there like all dejected,
listening to it.
Yeah, listening to him just get torn apart. So wild, but yeah, I mean, I was interested to see, because you would think they would have to take, some more, at least get more offensive linemen than what they did.
Yeah.
And they ended up not doing that. Sorry to like interrupt what you were. What point?
Oh no, that's exactly.
So we're also going to talk here about as far as who's the biggest surprise in terms of how far they fell, and I don't know what you have, B. Scott, but I think it's hard to ignore what happened. As it's tough to ignore what happened to quarterback Malik Willis falling to round 3 to the Titans. Not only did Willis fall, but he was the 3rd quarterback taken, which is weird. Desmond Ridder. I mean, I will not lie. I cannot tell a lie. As the further Malik Willis fell, the more as a Colts fan, I was talking myself into like, maybe it's not the worst thing in the world if we draft a quarterback, at some point, in this draft. Maybe it's not the worst thing in the world if we do that. NFL and CBS both had him going in the top 10. I know we had him going in the top 10.
I had him as my first quarterback off the board.
He's ranked.
I thought people were going to try to start scrambling around to trade up into the top 10 with either Carolina or try to get ahead of Seattle. To be honest, I thought they were going to try to get ahead of Seattle to grab Malik Willis, because I just thought Malik Willis was a great fit for either Seattle or for Pittsburgh. And then when Pittsburgh got on the clock and the quarterbacks were all still sitting there, I was like, this is it. This is Malik Willis. Kenny Pickett. I was like, honestly, when more I thought about it, I was like, that makes a lot of sense. Kenny Pickett, all he has to do is just walk down the hall and he's in a new locker room. I mean, everybody knows him there. So it's a really cool situation for him. But the ESPN guys were just like, what do people know that we don't? What is going on? Like, everything says he should have been taken by now. Everything says he should have been the first quarterback off the board. What do they all know that we don't? And that was the shocking thing, because these guys are usually pretty much, they know a lot, probably even more than some of these scouts. Maybe not, but the fact that the ESPN guys were just at a complete loss, like nothing points to why he's falling all the way to the 3rd round. And it was like, I mean, you've seen when a quarterback drops, we've seen it. Aaron Rodgers, obviously, Brady Quinn, Lamar Jackson, it happens. But for a guy to be a projected top 10, top 15 pick, first quarterback off the board, and fall all the way to the 3rd round, that's like, okay, what did we miss? I mean, the only thing I can think of is that the competition level that he faced as a quarterback was not as high.
But I mean, we've seen
as the other guys.
Jimmy Garoppolo out of Eastern Illinois, Joe Flacco out of Delaware. So I mean, it's not Carson Wentz out of North Dakota State.
But you look at those examples; those guys fit your prototypical quarterback mold.
True. Yeah.
They're big. They have strong arms. They can move what they need to move. This guy fits more of along the lines of Russell Wilson,
also a 3rd rounder.
Right. That is true. I thought, looking back, if I would have redraft, if I was the Colts, I'm taking Russell Wilson a lot higher. I'm taking Russell Wilson number 1 overall. Actually, I said that when I was on a radio show back at Ball State. I said, I thought about trading back and grabbing Russell Wilson and gaining more picks. And then I also wanted them to take, with obviously you're going to gain more another first rounder. And I said, take Justin Blackman, because obviously that was the best wide receiver in the draft. And look how he panned out.
1 or 2 seasons, right? And then he got into some
I think it was one season, one full season. And then, yep.
Because was Wilson the same year as Andrew Luck?
Yep.
So, hey, I selfishly, obviously, I'm glad the Colts took Luck, but also like maybe if he went to somebody else, he would probably still be in the league because they would actually put a offensive line around him. But
it makes you wonder then, would Russell Wilson still be in the league?
Yeah,
I don't think we would have won a Super Bowl like Russell Wilson has.
You wonder if maybe that had happened if would Russell Wilson be playing baseball now? Because
Probably.
It's not, I mean, would he have been like, okay, you know what? Screw the fact that they're not putting an offensive line around me. I'm just going to go play baseball and make a career out of that. Be a second baseman for the Yankees or the Rangers or whoever has his contract.
I think it was the Rangers. Okay. Yeah, but now it's too late to do that. And back then, why not? Because he went to Seattle and they put an offensive line around him and a defense and a running game. They did it. They did him right.
They did. So I mean, the fact that there was only one quarterback taken in the first round, and the fact that he was taken in the third and was the third quarterback selected, that's what combines to make it like we can't talk about anything else but that, as far as like what our biggest surprise as far as a guy falling, because it's not like, oh, this guy was a top 10 guy and fell to 25, but it's like he fell to 84.
I mean, I guess the only other one I could say was George Karlaftis falling to 30th.
Yeah.
But when you look at what happened, why it happened, it was such a run on wide receivers. Like, people panicked that needed wide receivers. And also people were like, this year they finally said, guess what? We're not paying this market value that was set ridiculously high by 2 guys that are going to teams that aren't going to be able to do anything with them. So rather than pay you this big exorbitant contract, guess what? We're going to trade you, and there's plenty of guys that are going to be a replacement. I mean, the perfect example of that being the Tennessee Titans and Treylon Burks. I mean, they traded AJ Brown, and they basically found his carbon copy. I mean, obviously, you don't know if he's going to be able to perform the same way as AJ Brown or be as successful, but the NFL comparison of Treylon Burks was AJ Brown. I mean, So they did exactly what they wanted. And obviously, if you look at some like video from inside the Titans war room, you can tell Mike Vrabel was not happy. Obviously, you're not going to be happy when you trade away one of the best players in the league. You really want to keep him around. Now you got to start fresh with a rookie. So,
and then it's the unknown. I mean, the fact that they went out and got Julio, which that wasn't a deal that didn't really pan out for them as far as what they were hoping for because of injuries. So, like, now you're just looking at a couple of unknowns, or some more unknowns when you had fine, the Julio Jones plan didn't work out, but at least we still have AJ Brown, and now the cupboard isn't bare, obviously. I mean, you still have, some good talent there, but
you still got Derrick Henry.
Right, but I mean, you don't have... now,
which, by the way, Derrick Henry is the preseason second odds-on favorite to be the NFL rushing leader at the end of next season at plus 550, and the leader, the preseason favorite to be the NFL rushing leader at the end of next season at plus 500, Jonathan Taylor.
Hey, let's go.
So if you're looking for, throw $20 down on Jonathan Taylor, it's on pretty good odds, plus 500, good return on that.
Yeah, for sure. Bottom line though, Ryan Tannehill is under contract for 2 more seasons. Willis has 2 years to learn under him, and I do not look forward to the combination of Malik Willis and Derrick Henry. And
Malik Willis with a chip on his shoulder.
Yeah,
come on.
Yeah, it's gonna be
rough. So Colts, your window is now
until now until maybe Ryan
those
Tannehill
rookies
retires,
become seasoned, and that's when it'll be kind of tough. But the George Karlaftis falling kind of was surprising.
Jermaine Johnson too. I mean, he was
those two, but because of the run on wide receivers, and the amount of trading that went on for wide receivers, it ended up becoming not too surprising. Like they even said, look, the Kansas City Chiefs got a steal here. This was a guy that any other year would be a top 10 pick. But because of this crazy year and also the high number of defensive ends, I mean, at one point, he was looking at potentially even a top 5. So, hey, it happens.
Quickly here, let's get into our way too early rookie of the year projections. We're going to go for offense and defense. Offensively for me, I'm going to go with wide receiver Treylon Burks, who went to the Titans. Just talked about him a little bit. He was drafted out of Arkansas. His player comp, like you mentioned, B. Scott, is literally A.J. Brown, whose trade allowed the Titans to grab him. A.J., so if you're looking at that, A.J. Brown was third in Rookie of the Year voting in 2019 behind Kyler Murray and Josh Jacobs. He had over 1,000 yards and 8 touchdowns. In 3 seasons, Brown had two 1,000-yard seasons with 2 seasons of 8 touchdowns or more, with the exception being this past season where I think he battled some injuries and things like that. The Titans are an AFC contender, and even with King Henry, who you would think, okay, well, he's going to a team that runs the ball a lot. Well, A.J. Brown was still very good, very productive in his time with the Titans, and if this is literally his, clone, then I think he's going to be used quite a bit and be a good,
fine.
Be a pretty good candidate to be Rookie of the Year. As far as defense goes, I wavered on this a little bit. I saw Kyle Hamilton for the Ravens was the kind of early favorite. I wanted to go Kyer Elam, who went to the Bills out of Florida, but I'm going to go with cornerback Trent McDuffie, who was drafted by the Chiefs out of Washington. Now, looking at Elam, like I said, I kind of wanted to go with him. He will play opposite of Tre'Davious White on a defense that was one of the best in the league last year, meaning he will likely be picked on more by opposing offenses, so I think there will be more growing pains because you either have to throw to a guy who's being covered by Tre'Davious White or a rookie. I think most teams are going to focus on the rookie, and not saying that Elam won't adjust, but I think there's more of a chance for him to either A, get lost in that Bills defense with as many great players as there are, or potentially have some growing pains because he will be picked on quite a bit. So that's why I went with McDuffie, because this is a defense that, yes, he will also probably get picked on, but also this defense needed so much more help. The Chiefs were 27th in the league last year in pass defense. They lose Tyrann Mathieu, who just got signed by the Saints. They lose Charvarius Ward this offseason as well. So KC was desperate for help in the secondary. McDuffie is fast. He's versatile. He can excel in both man and zone coverage. Is one of the better tackling corners in the draft. So I think he will thrive on this Chiefs defense that needs secondary help incredibly badly.
Yeah, so my Rookie of the Year, for me, it's an easy one. I'm going actually with Christian Watson, wide receiver getting drafted by the Green Bay Packers. Look, of all the wide receivers drafted early, Christian Watson, I think, is in the best situation. He's going to a team with an MVP. I mean, back-to-back MVPs. I mean, honestly, I considered Garrett Wilson to the Jets because I think Zach Wilson is going to rely heavily on him, but I don't have as much faith in Zach Wilson as I do Aaron Rodgers. And Christian Watson, one of his comps was Devontae Adams. So Devontae Adams was Aaron Rodgers' favorite target. So I think that really bodes well. As far as defensive Rookie of the Year, man, it was tough. I am going to go with
See, I almost picked George Karlaftis. I figured you might consider that as well. Because, I mean, that's going to be a good situation for him in KC, like you mentioned. Because that's the thing you have to factor in, too. The fact that, while it is probably 75-80% production. If you have that production and your team is 4-13, then you're not gonna get as much of a look as you would if your team even is 500. So
Right. That's true. Yeah, I want to. The only other one I could say is Ahmad Sauce Gardner, corner out of that got picked by the Jets. I mean, this guy's already playing with a chip on his shoulder, playing for coming out of Cincinnati. He's got the size, and he's going to be playing in a division that will be passing the ball a lot. And that makes me also kind of lean a little bit towards Derek Stingley Jr. as well as a potential. But the only reason why I lean more towards Sauce Gardner is because Derek Stingley he's playing for the Texans. Your two best teams in the AFC South have the two best running backs in the NFL. So that's I'm leaning more towards Sauce Gardner on this one. Because he's going to be playing in that New York market, so more eyes will be on him regardless of what the team's record is. And I think, I don't know, because it is tough to pick a corner in this, because if you are a good corner, teams don't throw your way, and you become unseen, essentially. Which is, if that's the sign of a good corner, when they're not calling your name out. That's a good thing. So that's what makes it tough. So I guess I'm going to say either Sauce Gardner or George Karlaftis, just because I think George Karlaftis has the opportunity to pin his ears back and just do what he does best, and that's get to the quarterback. But he's also going to show that he is a good run stopper as well. So yeah, those are my two picks. That kind of, I'm going to say rookie of the year.
I mean, it is kind of going out on a limb to take a corner, like you mentioned, because a lot of the last few defensive rookie of the years are either on the defensive line or linebackers. So, I can't remember the last time a corner won. I think it was what's his name he was with the Saints. He was the guy that got burned on the Minneapolis Miracle, and I can't remember what his name was, but
he wasn't a corner, he was a safety.
Oh, maybe. I'm not entirely sure.
I know who you're talking about. He was from Ohio State.
Yeah. But yeah, so it is going out on a limb a little bit, taking a corner, but there you have it. That's our take on the NFL draft as a whole. We're going to get to the Colts here in just a moment, but first of all, let's go ahead and hear from our friends of the show. First of all, from Anchor, the Crash Course podcast is brought to you by Anchor. Looking to start a podcast but don't know where to start? Look no further than Anchor.fm. Anchor allows you to record and edit your podcast right from your computer or mobile device, and will distribute it to other sites such as Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. If you're on a budget, not only is Anchor completely free of charge, but will allow you to make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. Download the free Anchor app or go to Anchor.fm to get started. Anchor, it's everything you need in a podcast in one place. Also, the Crash Course podcast is brought to you by Eat Lunch and Board Game. The Crash Course podcast is happy to partner with Eat Lunch and Board Game, which can be heard on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify, and wherever podcasts can be heard. Board games build bridges. We also like to remind you that you can go like us on Facebook, 3C Media. Go follow us on Twitter at 3C Media Sports. Go check out the YouTube channel, 3C Media, over there. We've got a lot of good content coming out there as well as on TikTok, so make sure you're following on all those different avenues. Remember, you can watch us live every week, twitch.tv/CraigCrash. Remember, you can listen to the Crash Course podcast every week on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify. Wherever podcasts can be heard, you can Crash Course podcast. Let's go ahead and dive in to the Indianapolis Colts here and their selections. First of all, they made a trade with the Vikings to move back in the draft, so their first selection wasn't until pick 53. They did get to pick, 3 times in the third round, so that was pretty nice. Because they made 4 selections total. So
that's right, because they traded away one of their third picks, or
they traded away their extra 4th rounder and got
an extra third when they moved up to get Nick Cross.
So, their first selection, round 2, pick 53, they got Alec Pierce, wide receiver out of Cincinnati. I know that's a guy that B. Scott and I both had our eyes on. Also,
what's funny though is the guy that I think you had picked to the Colts, got picked one pick later.
one pick earlier, Wan'Dale Robinson.
No,
43.
I thought you had Sky Moore.
Oh no, I didn't have Sky Moore.
Okay.
I had Alec Pierce, Wan'Dale Robinson, and I had a tight end out of Texas A&M. I can't.
Okay.
Then speaking of tight ends, round 3, pick 73, Jelani Woods out of Virginia. He gets selected there. Round 3, pick 77, Bernard Raymond, offensive tackle out of Central Michigan. Maction showing up. And then the final pick of day 2 for the Colts, round 3, pick 96, Nick Cross, safety out of Maryland. Then on day 3, round 5, pick 159, Eric Johnson, defensive tackle out of Missouri State.
Love that pick.
In the sixth round, pick 192, Andrew Ogletree, tight end out of Youngstown State. Round 6, pick 216, Curtis Brooks, defensive tackle out of Cincinnati. And in round 7, Rodney Thomas, safety out of Yale. So those were the Colts draft picks. So you're high on Eric Johnson, huh? Because I definitely hadn't heard of him before. But yeah, I guess.
Well, I guess for me it's a little different.
Yeah.
I covered FCS football
say.
last year, so it's like, oh yeah, Eric Johnson out of Missouri State, and then you got Andrew Ogletree out of Youngstown State, and Rodney Thomas out of Yale. I mean, these guys I've actually heard of before. But the one that excites me the most is Eric Johnson. I mean, this kid's got a motor and a mean streak to him. Set him alongside. I mean, eventually this is going to be the guy that will slide in for Grover Stewart when that time comes. And him alongside as a rotational piece, put him next to DeForest Buckner. Oh my gosh, that's going to be a good one. I really like that one. And Jelani Woods, that is a sneaky, really good pick. I think, honestly, if there's 2 guys in this draft outside of Eric Johnson, obviously, that have a chance to become big time names for the Colts, because there's always at least 1 or 2 guys that do it here recently. Jelani Woods is one, because I think he's going to be for the Colts what they've always thought Mo Alley Cox would be. And so Jelani Woods and then Bernard Raymond. I think this is a guy that would have been a first round pick easily, but they were all worried that his arms weren't long enough. Oh, come on.
That's always
that's honestly, that is what this whole draft was. Like, George Karlaftis fell because he had short arms. Oh, stop. Like, what kind of player is he? That's what I want to know. What kind of player is he? Like, this guy, he's going to need some coaching up because he hasn't been playing football very long. I mean, look, he played professional football at the age of 14 in the Netherlands. I mean, he's got the experience. I mean, obviously, oh, wow, he played professional football in the Netherlands. Yeah, but still, I mean,
it just always baffles me when they come out with like critiques like that. It's because it's like, do we not have at least 2 years of highlight film of this player excelling at the collegiate level? And I know that there's a lot of players that, you know, have success at the collegiate level that don't make it to the NFL, but obviously we're talking about him.
There's a lot of guys that have like no success at the collegiate level that come into the NFL as undrafted free agents and blow it all up.
Right.
I honestly, you don't have him on here. It's because he was an undrafted free agent for the Colts. Offensive tackle Tyler Van Dyke out of UConn is a guy that I actually had mocked to the Colts a couple times, and I'll tell you what, it's going to be a battle between him and Bernard, because these 2 guys, that's good. Really, I mean, obviously the Colts really wanted him because they paid like a massive contract to him, like guaranteed money, like really high for an undrafted free agent, $125,000, which is, you know, when you look at NFL contracts, you're like, oh, that's nothing. Like, no, but for a UDFA, that's a lot of money. So yeah, but him and then Nick Cross. If I'm Kari Willis, I'm a little worried. Like, I got to step up, because Nick Cross, or even, I don't know which safety spot he would fit into the most, but tell you what, he's going to be a really good depth piece this year. I know everybody, I was talked about a couple weeks ago, I was like, and they need to figure out the safety position. You know, they let George Odom walk, and the health of Julian Blackmon and Kari Willis isn't always the best. You upgraded over George Odom big time, and Nick Cross. Great move. So I really actually liked this draft by the Colts. I think, I mean, they kind of went off of what you would typically expect. I don't know. They went down their own route in the later rounds, which a lot of teams do. That's where it, to me, it's like, it's a crapshoot. When you get to really rounds 6 and 7, it's just like,
well, when I graded,
I need a warm body.
right. When I graded the Colts draft, I really only based it on the top 5 selections. Because, like, yeah, once, I mean, there was some, like, I looked at the grades for all of their picks on ESPN, and some of them were like, oh, they get an F for this. I'm like, okay, screw you, ESPN. Like at that point, like, are we really splitting hairs on who was, you know, this guy that was drafted in the 6th round who, you know, the Colts? I mean, obviously, are ESPN? Do you think you know what the Colts need more than the Colts? Like, do you think, oh well, they should have taken this guy was technically valued higher?
You know, yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah.
That is exactly what it is right there.
So,
or the Colts need a quarterback, so they left a quarterback on the board, and they took Andrew Ogletree instead. Well, guess what? They still signed Jack Cohn as an undrafted free agent.
Okay.
And a lot of people had him mocked to the Colts. So the Colts got him still.
Yeah.
They didn't use a pick.
Right. So yeah, I mean, so speaking of grades, you know, when I'm looking at it, you know, I'm feeling a B with this one. You know, looking at the grades that ESPN had for the first 5 picks the Colts made, they'd grade out overall to a C+. Now
That's surprising. That's so surprising. Okay. I cannot remember this analyst's name. He was sitting in the middle, not Melkai. He was sitting in the middle of the set on night 1 and 2.
Oh, okay. I was like, I know Louis Riddick was in the middle on
Louis Riddick.
Is Louis Riddick? Okay.
It wasn't Louis. No. Who's the other guy? He's not Louis Riddick. He was always on Mike and Mike in the morning. Oh my
gosh. Mike Golick.
No, it wasn't one of those guys.
Mike Greenberg.
I'm gonna look him up, but
yeah, I mean, you know, I will say, it is tough to look at the Titans draft and not be a smidge jealous. You know, just because that's a team that, of course, had all of their draft picks a little bit more their ducks a little bit more in the row as far as draft picks. You know, not having the kind of fracas that was the Colts trading for Carson Wentz and then trading him away to get Matt Ryan, because they drafted Treylon Burks in the 1st round. They did draft offensive tackle Nicholas Petit-Frere in the 3rd, and Malik Willis in 3rd as well. Those are 2 players that I would like to have seen on the Colts. You know, and that's the consequence of going for Carson Wentz, which was a move I was on board for. It just you know, kind of stinks a little bit. But you know, it went pretty similarly to the mock draft that I had for them, so I think I'm bound by the rules of podcasting to think highly on this draft, which I already did anyway. I had them taking 3 new targets for Matt Ryan, an offensive tackle, and a safety with their first 5 picks. The Colts grabbed 2 new targets for Matt Ryan, an offensive tackle, and a safety in their first 5 picks. You know, Alec Pierce, we raved about him, 884 yards, 8 touchdowns on 52 catches at Cincinnati. Player comp to Jordy Nelson and Donovan Peoples-Jones. His pros were that he's big, strong, has toughness to work in the middle of the field. But you know, he wasn't quick on his route running, and I feel like that was something that could be corrected with coaching. Jelani Woods, you know, his player comp is Jordan Thomas, who ironically was a Colt in 2021. Woods had all ACC honors in 2021, 44 catches, 598 yards, and 8 touchdowns. His size is a big pro here, so having him and Mo Alley-Cox, you know, I know you mentioned how he is could be what the Colts thought Mo Alley-Cox could be, but now you basically have 2 versions of Mo Alley-Cox. But he does need to fill out to become a better blocker. Bernard Raymond. He moved from tight end to offensive tackle during the pandemic, which I thought was pretty wild. He's still developing, but developed fast so far and is projected to have the talent to be a long-time starter at offensive tackle. You've got Nick Cross, 67 tackles, 3 sacks, 3 INTs, 2 forced fumbles, touted as an explosive hitter. They added another potential offensive weapon in Andrew Ogletree, then added more defensive depth in the secondary and defensive line. So overall, we wanted the Colts to get Matt Ryan help, draft the left tackle of the future, and depth on defense, and Chris Ballard did exactly that. So I think looking at this draft, when I look at like an A+ draft, I think more along the lines of when they got Jonathan Taylor and Michael Pittman, and maybe that's just the bias of like, oh, those are more notable positions that they were drafted at than some of these positions the Colts needed this year. But I think it was a solid draft. I'm giving it a B overall.
So I'm going to give it an A- overall. Once I find the name of this guy. And
who's in the middle on day 2?
Day 1.
Day 1? Okay. Not Louis Riddick.
Maybe it was it Louis Riddick? I don't know. He's a former NFL executive. I know that.
I think you might be thinking of Louis Riddick.
I might be.
Because Louis Riddick, I know, went on SVP and Russillo / Russillo and Cannell / Will Kane and Ryan Russillo / Russillo and all the guys that co-hosted him before he left. So I think you are thinking of Louis Riddick.
Maybe I am. Yeah, I am. That's him. Yeah, Louis Riddick. He kept saying over and over again, the Colts have won this draft. The Colts not only have won this draft, they've won the offseason. This draft, Chris Ballard was making moves. Everybody seemed to be playing checkers, and he was playing chess. He was super, super, super high on what the Colts were doing, and they would trade back, get more picks, and they would make. It was just like we all had these questions of how are they going to fill these holes? And Chris Ballard basically said, "Hold my beer," and he did. He answered the questions. I mean, he got weapons. The Colts needed weapons. All right, guess what? We got weapons. The Colts needed offensive tackle. Guess what? We got one that fell to us that probably should have been much higher. I mean, when you look at now, they just needed a little bit more veteran presence. I mean, the Colts have done so much through this draft to help get themselves into a position. And I think also they won. In his mind, they also won too because of Tennessee trading A.J. Brown. That catapulted the Colts up in the hierarchy of the AFC South. But when you got your guys super high on the Colts, and then the ESPN only gives them a C+.
Yeah, let me see here. So looking at the Colts, Alec Pierce graded out 82. So he that was a B+ or B- pick. Jelani Woods was graded 75, which I assume this is out of 100. I don't know ESPN, and that's the thing too. It's crazy. You've got guys like Louis Riddick who actually did the darn thing.
So here, this is him. This is him. This is word for word from Louis Riddick. I think Chris Ballard in the Indianapolis Colts killed it. They killed it all offseason with veteran acquisitions like Matt Ryan and Yannick Ngakoue. And then on day 2, they went crazy as far as I'm concerned. They got players that I just love. Alec Pierce in the second round, I think, is going to be a steal for them. Jelani Woods is a monster at tight end, and he is going to be a receiving threat. They got their franchise left tackle in Bernard Ryman out of Central Michigan, and then Nick Cross at safety, a guy, Todd McShay, I know you like him because he's a fantastic athlete and he can make plays on the ball. And then they get depth with Andrew Ogletree, Curtis Brooks, Rodney Thomas, but they have just put on a clinic as far as team building 101, starting with the veteran free agency market, culminating Saturday in the NFL draft. I think look out for the Colts in the AFC South. So he essentially said not only did they win the 2022 NFL draft, they won the entire offseason.
Pretty incredible.
And this is a guy that, I mean, he says it like it is. He doesn't have play favorites, in my opinion. He's one of the, when he says something, I take it to heart far as what his analysis is.
And that's what I was getting ready to say too, is just the fact that like you're I would put more stock obviously in what Riddick says because he's done the darn thing. You're also talking about some of the people that grade out those picks that they might have some level of scouting or something like that, but I don't. It's obviously not the same people giving the grades as it is as the guy who actually did the darn thing. So
Right,
that's
but
why
he's actually done the darn thing.
right. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's what I like. So I think yeah. I'm giving him an A- just because they hit the nail on the head where they needed to, and then they, like you said, they added depth pieces, but you can't go any higher than an A- really when you don't have a first round pick.
Yeah,
So
and that's fair. That's completely fair. So looking at which new prospect, which new player for the Colts has you most excited? For me, it might sound odd. I talked a lot about Alec Pierce. Literally was in my mock draft, so you might think I'm going there, but no, I'm gonna go with Bernard Raymond. I'm going with the MAC player, offensive tackle. First of all, having a tough time not calling him Rain Man. Like, so can we have a petition to have Big Q and the Rain Man be like a Colts themed morning show, like mini podcast? Because that would be amazing. Even if it's just for merch, I would go for that. I can't get over the fact that he made the transition from tight end to O-line in 2021, his first year on the offensive line. He was first team All-MAC. He won the MAC Medal of Excellence for academic and athletic excellence. He's a smart dude. He'll learn and develop fast. He's big. He's from the MAC. Like, I'm sold. Like, there's so many great things about this kid. And I'm really excited to see him alongside Quentin Nelson just being a brick wall on that side of the line. I'm really excited.
Yeah, so for me, I'm actually going to say Nick Cross. I mean, I want to say Jelani Woods just because I feel like he's gonna explode into something really, really good for the Colts, especially if he can pick up a blocking a little bit. But Nick Cross, to me, is just one of those picks that, yeah, he's super athletic. He has a nose for the ball. And this defense for the Colts is just looking better and better every day. And now he's going to be a really good depth piece, and he's going to see the field. And I don't know, I feel like safety just got a lot better with Nick Cross coming into the room as a rookie.
I'm excited to see well. So moving forward, the question is, what do you want to see the Colts do? Now I'm gonna go ahead and read off the undrafted free agents because that's always the big thing too. The Colts went a little hog
They go
wild.
crazy with.
Yeah, I was like, with running backs, especially, I'm looking at it and I see like 3 running backs already off the board. So you mentioned Jack Cohn, quarterback out of Notre Dame. They also got C.J. Verdell, a running back out of Oregon.
That's a guy I had mocked to the Colts as well in a later round. So
yeah,
I was happy about that.
Yeah, he's good. Max Borghi, running back out of Washington State. Devontae Price, running back out of Florida International. Kakoa Crawford, wide receiver out of California. Samson Nakoa, wide receiver out of BYU. Michael Young Jr., wide receiver out of Cincinnati. Josh.
Apparently, that is one to really keep your eye on.
Really?
So a couple weeks before the draft, the Colts were down in Cincinnati, and it was all broadcasted out that, the Colts are in Cincinnati working out quarterback Desmond Ridder. Well, it was all smokescreen. They were down there working out Alec Pierce and Michael Young. And because those were the targets that they had they worked out Desmond Ridder, but they were really down there working out Alec Pierce and Michael Young. They knew all along. Michael Young was on their board all along. They knew they needed to target him.
They also got Josh Schultzner, guard out of Wisconsin. Alex Millette, guard out of Marshall. Wesley French, center out of Western Michigan. Ryan Van Denmark.
Yeah, Ryan Van Denmark
out of Connecticut. Yeah. Colin Wick, defensive end out of Tulsa. McKinley Williams, defensive lineman out of Syracuse. Scott Patchen, defensive lineman out of Colorado State. Forrest Ryan, linebacker from Villanova. JoJo Doman, linebacker from Nebraska. Dallas Flowers.
That's a good one, too.
Cornerback out of Pittsburgh State. Sterling Weatherford, linebacker safety out of Miami of Ohio. And Trevor Denbo, safety out of SMU. So
there's one more you forgot.
all the ones that are listed on the stars. So I don't know if
there is one more that
it?
has signed. Yeah, wide receiver Jackson Andrew out of Purdue.
There we go. Well, and I was wondering too, because I was like, that's what I wanted them to do. Looking at the undrafted free agents, we made the outline. They hadn't really announced those yet, or hadn't got into them. And that's what I wanted the Colts to do. Look at a quarterback. They get Jackson Cone, because I think, the Colts expressed their desire to have Matt Ryan for 4 years. Which I thought was kind of surprising. I guess that will be through his age 40 or 41 season, so that's not awfully bad as far as. I think that's feasible. Which is what I imagine what they think their window is for being a Super Bowl contender. So I think they need to explore all potential options for Ryan's predecessor. Or not predecessor. I don't think that's the right word for it, but you know what I mean. So they need to bring in, the Jackson Cones. Next year, I wouldn't be surprised if they maybe drafted a quarterback. Depending on what they're looking at, explore every single option. Don't leave any stone unturned, because you have, if you now you believe you have your option, your short term / slightly long term, intermediate term quarterback, make the most of it. Try to find that guy that you're very confident in will be the quarterback of the future, for your team.
I think that's next year's draft.
Yeah. Maybe
I'm not looking at the quarterback of the future being an undrafted free agent.
You just never know. I'm just saying,
explore.
Don't leave. What I'm saying is, ultimately, is don't leave any stone unturned. You have Sam Ehlinger, you have Jack Cohn, so you're gonna see what can happen there. Yes, maybe next year in the draft you get somebody. But what I'm saying is, ultimately, is I don't want them to wait until 2024, the draft, and Matt Ryan's retired and we're taking a flyer on somebody in the third round. Not to say, we mentioned, a couple of quarterbacks that we think highly of that got drafted in the third round, but just in general, not waiting until that last minute to be okay, this guy randomly. Because, what if you fall into a situation like this year where it's another very light quarterback class?
Right.
Because what we've seen from the Colts is they'll always be in that middle round, except for the 1 year that they drafted, number 1 overall here lately with Andrew Luck. I don't foresee them having a number 1 overall pick or a top 5 or 10 pick season with Matt Ryan at the helm.
Next year, Aiden O'Connell.
I'm just overall saying leave no stone unturned. If you can find a guy, find a guy. Again, obsessed with getting Matt Ryan weapons, which it looks like they did that, and offensive line depth, which they've done that. So moving on from there, I just, I want to see them look at more veteran guys. And I know you mentioned that earlier, B. Scott, start bringing in some of the veteran names. The names I'm going to list off are probably the ones that are more unattainable for the Colts.
I don't know.
But I still want to see, something along these lines. So, of course, we can't say Tyrann Mathieu anymore. He just went to the Saints. Julio Jones.
Good for him. Good for him.
For sure.
Hometown there. Good.
Yeah.
That's a good fit.
So I'm thinking, Julio Jones, OBJ, Jarvis Landry, wide receiver. Get one more wide receiver in that room. Nate Soldier's available out of, he was with the Giants. He's at left tackle out there. You have, those might be pipe dreams, but if the Colts can grab one of those guys, it's just hard to tell.
Some of those names are pipe dreams, though. I think those are good targets now. Yeah. Now, Jarvis Landry is apparently in advanced talks to go back to Cleveland, so that could be any day. But when you look at Julio Jones and OBJ, I don't think either one of those are pipe dreams, to be honest.
Well, it's just with the Colts,
it's doable because of their injury.
Yeah, the
history.
Colts.
And honestly,
though. That's the only
apparently the player to keep an eye on that is most likely going to be coming back is T.Y. Hilton.
Yeah.
Which wouldn't be a bad thing now. It really wouldn't. So, but yeah, I like I said, for me, the next move the Colts need to make, one, get these wide receivers that you drafted or undrafted and signed, get them with Reggie Wayne. I know when the Colts went down to Cincinnati, they took their full offensive staff and Chris Ballard, And Reggie Wayne absolutely fell in love with Alec Pierce. That is great. I think Alec Pierce is going to just turn into an absolute stud with being coached up by Reggie Wayne. So I think that's key. But yeah, another veteran in the wide receiver room would be helpful, to be honest, because it is still a very young room. When your oldest player in there is Michael Pittman now at this point,
A product of the 2020 draft.
yeah, you do need a little bit of help. Otherwise, maybe I don't know if there's. Yeah, I'm still not 100% sold at left tackle on Matt Pryor, but really the next biggest thing the Colts need to look at is interior offensive line depth. So I don't know, offensive line depth and wide receiver depth are still the two biggest needs that they need to address, and that will be happening. It's going to happen because look, there's going to be guys that are going to get cut because of how many players teams drafted, and then and I wouldn't be surprised to see players like OBJ or Julio Jones still not with a team as we get closer to training camp. Because look, Julio Jones had an injury-filled season last year, and OBJ is coming off of a knee injury suffered in the Super Bowl. Now, I feel like most likely OBJ still goes back to the Rams because there's that connection there. They feel like they owe each other, but I wouldn't be mad to see OBJ that they took a flyer on him at all. Honestly, I would prefer him over Julio.
Me too, yeah.
Because I feel like what we saw from Julio last year is what we started seeing from Andre Johnson when the Colts brought him in.
That's what one of my buddies from work said too. He's like, this is Andre Johnson 2.0 if they bring him in. And
now, Julio is a little bit younger. So yeah, I will say that there is a higher likelihood of Julio Jones rebounding than Andre Johnson, mostly because you're bringing in Julio Jones and pairing him up with the quarterback that made him a Pro Bowl wide receiver. So there's that connection there. So but the Colts, I feel like they will make moves. It just has to be at the right price for them. And I think that's why you haven't seen these moves made. There's still question marks on some of these players. And hey, get ready because there's going to be other guys that are going to get cut. And when the Colts will pounce is when we get to the training camp time of year and roster trimming has to be done. That's where they'll pick up some key veterans at that point in time as well.
Well, that'll do it for this week's edition of the Crash Course podcast. Thank you guys all for tuning in and listening. Remember, that you can like us on Facebook, 3C Media. Go follow us on Twitter at 3C Media Sports. Go over to the YouTube channel, 3C Media over there. Also 3C Media on TikTok as well. We are live every week, twitch.tv/CraigCrash, as well as you can listen to us every week on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify. Wherever podcasts can be heard, you can hear the Crash Course podcast. You can find me at Crash Course FM on Twitter. B. Scott, where can they find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Brandon_Scott87. And I do challenge y'all, go out and follow us on Spotify. If you got Apple CarPlay, I just got Apple CarPlay in my new car, and I'm able to listen to this podcast in my car while driving to and from work. So definitely go out and give it a follow.
Speaking of cars, the draft is in the rearview mirror, which means it's time for us to discuss
it's gonna be May.
Yes, it's time for us to discuss some IndyCar. So that's going to be the topic of next week. We're going to give a recap of the IndyCar season so far, and then we're going to get you into the month of May. So it's going to be a lot of fun. But until next week, have a good one, everybody.